Prapataka 5 of the Chandogya Upanishad, translated by Max Muller, recording by Jyoti Taravanat. Fifth Prapataka, First Kanda. He who knows the oldest and the best becomes himself the oldest and the best. Breath indeed is the oldest and the best. He who knows the richest becomes himself the richest. Speech indeed is the richest. He who knows the firm rest becomes himself firm in this world and in the next. The eye indeed is the firm rest. He who knows success, his wishes succeed, both his divine and human wishes. The ear indeed is success. He who knows the home becomes the home of his people. The mind indeed is the home. The five senses quarrel together. Who was the best, saying, I am better, I am better. They went to the father Prajapati and said, Sir, who is the best of us? He replied, He by whose departure the body seems worse than worst. He is the best of you. The tongue, speech, departed. And having been absent for a year, it came round and said, How have you been able to live without me? They replied, Like mute people, not speaking, but breathing with the breath, seeing with the eye, hearing with the ear, thinking with the mind. Thus we lived. Then speech went back. The eye sight departed. And having been absent for a year, it came round and said, How have you been able to live without me? They replied, Like blind people, not seeing, but breathing with the breath, speaking with the tongue, hearing with the ear, thinking with the mind. Thus we lived. Then the eye went back. The ear, hearing, departed. And having been absent for a year, it came round and said, How have you been able to live without me? They replied, Like deaf people, not hearing, but breathing with the breath, speaking with the tongue, thinking with the mind. Thus we lived. Then the ear went back. The mind departed. And having been absent for a year, it came round and said, How have you been able to live without me? They replied, Like children, whose mind is not yet formed, but breathing with the breath, speaking with the tongue, seeing with the eye, hearing with the ear. Thus we lived. Then the mind went back. The breath, when on the point of departing, tore up the other senses, as a horse going to start. I might tear up the pegs to which he is tethered. They came to him and said, Sir, be thou our Lord, thou art the best among us. Do not depart from us. Then the tongue said to him, If I am the richest, thou art the richest. The eye said to him, If I am the firm rest, thou art the firm rest. The ear said to him, If I am success, thou art success. The mind said to him, If I am the home, thou art the home. And people do not call them the tongues, the eyes, the ears, the minds, but the breaths, prana, the senses. For breath are all these. Second Kanda. Breath said, What shall be my food? They answered, Whatever there is, even unto dogs and birds. Therefore this is food for Ana, the breather. His name is clearly Ana. To him who knows this, there is nothing that is not proper food. He said, What shall be my dress? They answered, Water. Therefore wise people, when they are going to eat food, surround their food before and after with water. He, Prana, thus gains a dress and is no longer naked. Satyakama Gabala, after he had communicated this to Gosrithi Vyagrapadya, said to him, "If you were to tell this to a dry stick, branches would grow and leaves spring from it. If a man wishes to reach greatness, let him perform the Diksha, preparatory rites, on the day of the new moon, and then on the night of the full moon let him stir a mash of all kinds of herbs with curds and honey, and let him pour ghee on the fire, Avasthya Laukika, saying Swaha to the oldest and the best. After that, let him throw all that remains of the ghee into the mash. In the same manner, let him pour ghee on the fire, saying Swaha to the richest. After that, let him throw all that remains together into the mash. In the same manner, let him pour ghee on the fire, saying Swaha to the firm rest. After that, let him throw all that remains together into the mash. In the same manner, let him pour ghee on the fire, saying Swaha to success. After that, let him throw all that remains together into the mash. Then going forward and placing the mash in his hands, he recites, Thou Prana art Ama by name, for all this together exists in thee. He is the oldest and best, the king, the sovereign. May he make me the oldest, the best, the king, the sovereign. May I be all this. Then he eats with the following Rik verse at every foot. We choose that food. Here he swallows. Of the divine Savitri, Prana, here he swallows. The best and all supporting food, here he swallows. We meditate on the speed of Bhaga, Savitri, Prana, here he drinks all. Having cleansed the vessel, whether it be a Kamsa or a Jamsa, he sits down behind the fire on a skin or on the bare ground, without speaking or making any other effort. If in his dream he sees a woman, let him know this is to be a sign that his sacrifice has succeeded. On this there is a sloka. If during sacrifices, which are to fulfill certain wishes, he sees in his dreams a woman, let him know success from this vision in a dream. From this vision in a dream. Swetaketu Varuneya went to an assembly of the Panchalas. Pravahana Gaivali said to him, Boy, has your father instructed you? Yes, sir, he replied. Do you know to what place men go from here? No, sir, he replied. Do you know how they return again? No, sir, he replied. Do you know where the path of Devas and the path of the fathers diverge? No, sir, he replied. Do you know why that world never becomes full? No, sir, he replied. Do you know why in the fifth libation water is called man? No, sir, he replied. Then why did you say you had been instructed? How could anybody who did not know these things say that he had been instructed? Then the boy went back sorrowful to the place of his father and said, Though you had not instructed me, sir, you said you had instructed me. That fellow of the Rajanya asked me 5 questions, and I could not answer one of them. The father said, As you have told me these questions of his, I do not know any of them. If I knew these questions, how should I not have told you? Then Gautama went to the king's place, and when he had come to him, the king offered him proper respect. In the morning, the king went out on his way to the assembly. The king said to him, Sir Gautama, ask a boon of such things as men possesses. He replied, Such things as men possesses may remain with you. Tell me the speech which you addressed to the boy." The king was perplexed, and commanded him, saying, "Stay with me some time." Then he said, "As to what you have said to me, Gautama, this knowledge did not go to any Brahmana before you, and therefore this teaching belonged in all the worlds to the Kshatriya class alone." Then he began. Fourth Kanda. The altar on which the sacrifice is supposed to be offered is that world, heaven, O Gautama. Its fuel is the sun itself, the smoke his rays, the light the day, the coals the moon, the sparks the stars. On that altar the Devas, or Pranas represented by Agni, etc., offer the Shraddha libation consisting of water. From that oblation rises Soma, the king, the moon. Fifth Kanda. The altar is Parjanya, the god of rain. O Gautama, its fuel is the air itself, the smoke the cloud, the light the lightning, the coals the thunderbolt, the sparks the thunderings. On that altar the Devas offer Soma, the king, the moon. From that oblation rises rain. Sixth Kanda. The altar is the earth, O Gautama. Its fuel is the ear itself, the smoke the ether, the light the night, the coals the quarters, the sparks the intermediate quarters. On that altar the Devas, Pranas offer rain. From that oblation rises food, corn, etc. Seventh Kanda. The altar is man, O Gautama. Its fuel speech itself, the smoke the breath, the light the tongue, the coals the eye, the sparks the ear. On that altar the Devas, Pranas offer food. From that oblation rises seed. Eighth Kanda. The altar is woman, O Gautama. On that altar the Devas, Pranas offer seed. From that oblation rises the germ. Ninth Kanda. For this reason is water in the fifth oblation called man. This germ, covered in the womb, having dwelt there 10 months or more or less, is born. When born, he lives whatever the length of his life may be. When he has departed, his friends carry him as appointed to the fire of the funeral pile, from whence he came, from whence he sprang. 10th Kanda. Those who know this, even though they still be Grihasthas, householders, and those who in the forest follow faith and austerities, the Vanaprasthas, and of the Parivragas, those who do not yet know the highest Brahman, go to light Archis. From light to day, from day to the light half of the moon, from the light half of the moon to the 6 months when the sun goes to the north, from the 6 months when the sun goes to the north to the year, from the year to the sun, from the sun to the moon, from the moon to the lightning. There is a person not human. He leads them to Brahman, the conditioned Brahman. This is the path of the Devas. But they who living in a village practice a life of sacrifices, works of public utility, and alms, they go to the smoke, from smoke to night, from night to the dark half of the moon, from the dark half of the moon to the 6 months when the sun goes to the south, but they do not reach the year. From the months they go to the world of the fathers, from the world of the fathers to the ether, from the ether to the moon. That is Soma, the king. Here they are loved, eaten by the Devas. Yes, the Devas love, eat them. Having dwelt there till their good works are consumed, they return again that way as they came to the ether, from the ether to the air. Then the sacrificer, having become air, becomes smoke. Having become smoke, he becomes mist. Having become mist, he becomes a cloud. Having become a cloud, he rains down. Then he is born as rice and corn, herbs and trees, sesame and beans. From thence the escape is the behest with most difficulties. For whoever the person may be, they eat the food and beget offspring. He henceforth becomes like unto them. Those whose conduct has been good will quickly attain some good birth, the birth of a Brahmana or a Kshatriya or a Vaisya. But those whose conduct has been evil will quickly attain an evil birth, the birth of a dog or a hog or a Chandala. On neither of these two ways those small creatures, flies, worms, etc., or continually returning, of whom it may be said, live and die, theirs is a third place. Therefore that world never becomes full. Hence let a man take care of himself. And thus it is said in the following sloka: A man who steals gold, who drinks spirits, who dishonors his Guru's bed, who kills a Brahmin, these four fall, and as a fifth he who associates with them. But he who thus knows the five fires is not defiled by sin, even though he associates with them. He who knows this is pure, clean, and obtains the world of the blessed. Yeah, he obtains the world of the blessed. 11th Kanda. Prachina Sala Anupamanyava Satyayajna Pauloshi Indrayumna Bhailavya Jana Sarkarakshya and Budila Asvantrasavi. These great 5 householders and great theologians came once together and held a discussion as to what is our self and what is Brahman. They reflected and said, Sirs, there is that Uddalaka Aruni who knows at present that self called Vaisavanara. Well, let's go to him. They went to him. But he reflected, those great householders and great theologians will examine me, and I shall not be able to tell them all. Therefore, I shall recommend another teacher to them. He said to them, Sirs, Asvapati Kaikeya knows at present that self called Vaisvanara. Well, let us go to him. They went to him. When they arrived, the king ordered proper presents to be made separately to each of them. And rising the next morning, he said, In my kingdom there is no thief, no miser, no drunkard, no man without an altar in his house, no ignorant person, no adulterer, much less an adulteress. I am going to perform a sacrifice. Sirs, and as much wealth as I give to each Ritvik priest, I shall give to you, sirs. Please to stay here. They replied, Every man ought to say for what purpose he comes. You know at present that Vaisvanara self. Tell us that. He said, Tomorrow I shall give you an answer. Therefore, on the next morning they approached him, carrying fuel in their hands, like students, and he, without first demanding any preparatory rites, said to them, 12th Kanda. Anupamanyava, whom do you meditate on as the self? He replied, Heaven only, Venerable King. He said, The self which you meditate on is the Vaisvanara self, called Sutejas, having good light. Therefore, every kind of soma libation is seen in your house. You eat food and see your desire, a son, etc. And whoever thus meditates on that Vaisvanara self, eats food, sees his desire, and has Vedic glory arising from study and sacrifice in his house. That, however, is but the head of the self, and thus your head would have fallen in a discussion if you had not come to me. 13th Kanda. Then he said to Satyayajna Paulushi, O Prachina Yogya, whom do you meditate on as the Self? He replied, The Sun only, Venerable King. He said, The Self which you meditate on is the Vaisvanara Self, called Visvarupa, multiform. Therefore, much and manifold wealth is seen in your house. There is a car with mules, full of slaves and jewels. You eat food and see your desire, and whoever thus meditates on the Vaisvanara Self eats food and sees his desire, and has Vedic glory in his house. That, however, is but the eye of the Self, and you would have become blind if you had not come to me. 14th Kanda. Then he said to Indrayumna Bhalavya, O Vayagrapadya, whom do you meditate on as the Self? He replied, Air only, Venerable King. He said, The Self which you meditate on is the Vaisvanara Self, called Pritagavartaman, having various courses. Therefore, offerings come to you in various ways, and rows of cars follow you in various ways. You eat food and see your desire, and whoever thus meditates on that Vaisvanara Self eats food and sees his desire, and has Vedic glory in his house. That, however, is but the breath of the Self, and your breath would have left you if you had not come to me. 15th Kanda. Then he said to Janasarkaraksha, Whom do you meditate on as the Self? He replied, Ether only, Venerable King. He said, The Self which you meditate on is the Vaisvanara Self, called Bahula, full. Therefore, you are full of offspring and wealth. You eat food and see your desire, and whoever thus meditates on that Vaisvanara Self eats food and sees his desire, and has Vedic glory in his house. That, however, is but the trunk of the Self, and your trunk would have perished if you had not come to me. 16th Kanda. Then he said to Buddhila Asvantrasvi, O Vayagrahapadya, whom do you meditate on as the Self? He replied, Water only, Venerable King. He said, The Self which you meditate on is the Vaisvanara Self, called Rayi, wealth. Therefore are you wealthy and flourishing. You eat food and see your desire, and whoever thus meditates on that Vaisvanara Self eats food and sees his desire, and has Vedic glory in his house. That, however, is but the bladder of the Self, and your bladder would have burst if you had not come to me. 17th Kanda. Then he said to Adalaka Aruni, O Gautama, whom do you meditate on as the Self? He replied, The earth only, Venerable King. He said, The Self which you meditate on is the Vaisvanara Self, called Pratishta, firm rest. Therefore, you stand firm with offspring and cattle. You eat food and see your desire, and whoever thus meditates on that Vaisvanara Self eats food and sees his desire, and has Vedic glory in his house. That, however, are but the feet of the Self, and your feet would have given way if you had not come to me. 18th Kanda. Then he said to them all, You eat your food, knowing that Vaisvanara Self as if it were many. But he who worships the Vaisvanara Self as a span long, and as identical with himself, he eats food in all worlds, in all beings, in all selves. Of that Vaisvanara self, the head is Sutejas, having good light; the eye Visvarupa, multiform; the breath Pritagavartman, having various courses; the trunk Bahula, full; the bladder Rai, wealth; the feet the earth; the chest the altar; the hairs the grass on the altar; the heart the Grahapatya fire; the mind the Anvaharya fire; the mouth the Ahavanya fire. 19th Kanda. Therefore, the first food which a man may take is in the place of Homa, and he who offers that first oblation should offer it to Prana, upbreathing, saying Swaha. Then Prana, upbreathing, is satisfied. If Prana is satisfied, the eye is satisfied. If the eye is satisfied, the sun is satisfied. If the sun is satisfied, heaven is satisfied. If heaven is satisfied, whatever is under heaven and under the sun is satisfied. And through their satisfaction, he, the sacrificer or eater, himself is satisfied with offspring, cattle, health, brightness, and Vedic splendor. 20th Kanda. And he who offers the second oblation should offer it to Vyana, back breathing, saying Swaha. Then Vyana is satisfied. If Vyana is satisfied, the ear is satisfied. If the ear is satisfied, the moon is satisfied. If the moon is satisfied, the quarters are satisfied. If the quarters are satisfied, whatever is under the quarters and under the moon is satisfied. And through their satisfaction, he, the sacrificer or eater, himself is satisfied with offspring, cattle, health, brightness, and Vedic splendor. 21st Kanda. And he who offers the third oblation should offer it to Apana, down breathing, saying Swaha. Then Apana is satisfied. If Apana is satisfied, the tongue is satisfied. If the tongue is satisfied, Agni, fire, is satisfied. If Agni is satisfied, the earth is satisfied. If the earth is satisfied, whatever is under the earth and under fire is satisfied. And through their satisfaction, he, the sacrificer or eater, himself is satisfied with offspring, cattle, health, brightness, and Vedic splendor. 22nd Kanda. And he who offers the fourth oblation should offer it to Samana, on breathing, saying Swaha. Then Samana is satisfied. If Samana is satisfied, the mind is satisfied. If the mind is satisfied, Parjanya, god of rain, is satisfied. If Parjanya is satisfied, lightning is satisfied. If lightning is satisfied, whatever is under Parjanya and under lightning is satisfied. And through their satisfaction, he, the sacrificer or eater, himself is satisfied with offspring, cattle, health, brightness, and Vedic splendor. 23rd Kanda. And he who offers the fifth oblation should offer it to Udana, out-breathing, saying Swaha. Then Udana is satisfied. If Udana is satisfied, Vayu, air, is satisfied. If Vayu is satisfied, ether is satisfied. If ether is satisfied, whatever is under Vayu and under the ether is satisfied. and through their satisfaction he, the sacrificer or eater, himself is satisfied with offspring, cattle, health, brightness, and Vedic splendor. 24th Kanda. If without knowing this, one offers an Agnihotra, it would be as if a man were to remove the live coals and pour his libation on dead ashes. But he who offers this Agnihotra with a full knowledge of its true purport, he offers it, that is, he eats food, in all worlds, in all beings, in all selves. As the soft fibers of the Ishika reed, when thrown into the fire, are burnt, thus all his sins are burnt, whoever offers this Agnihotra with a full knowledge of its true purport. Even if he gives what is left of his food to a Chandala, it would be offered in his, the Chandala's, Vaisvanara self. And so it is said in this sloka: as hungry children here on earth sit expectantly round their mother, so do all beings sit round the Agnihotra, round the Agnihotra. End of Prapataka 5. Recording by Jyoti Taravanat. Prapataka 6 of the Chandogya Upanishad. Translated by Max Muller. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. Recording by Jyoti Taravanat. 6th Prapataka, 1st Kanda. Hari Om. There lived once Swetaketu Aruneya, the grandson of Aruna. To him his father Uddalaka, the son of Aruna, said, Swetaketu, go to school, for there is none belonging to our race, darling, who, not having studied the Veda, is, as it were, a Brahmana by birth only. Having begun his apprenticeship with a teacher when he was 12 years of age, Swetaketu returned to his father when he was 24, having then studied all the Vedas, conceited, considering himself well-read and stern. His father said to him, Swetaketu, as you are so conceited, considering yourself so well-read and so stern, my dear, have you ever asked for that instruction by which we hear what cannot be heard, by which we perceive what cannot be perceived, by which we know what cannot be known? What is that instruction, sir? He asked. The father replied, My dear, as by one clod of clay all that is made of clay is known, the difference being only a name arising from speech, but the truth being that all is clay. And as, my dear, by one nugget of gold all that is made of gold is known, the difference being only a name arising from speech, but the truth being that all is gold. And, my dear, by one pair of nail scissors all that is made of iron, Karshanayasam, is known, the difference being only a name arising from speech, but the truth being that all is iron. Thus, my dear, is that instruction. The son said, Surely those venerable men, my teachers, did not know that, for if they had known it, why should they not have told it me? Do you, sir, therefore, tell me that? Be it so, said the father. 2nd Kanda. In the beginning, my dear, there was that only which is, Sat, one only, without a second. Others say In the beginning there was that only which is not, Asat, one only without a second. And from that which is not, that which is was born. But how could it be thus, my dear? The father continued. How could that which is be born of that which is not? No, my dear, only that which is was in the beginning, one only, without a second. It thought, may I be many, may I grow forth. It sent forth fire. That fire thought, may I be many, may I grow forth. It sent forth water. And therefore, whenever anybody anywhere is hot and perspires, water is produced on him from fire alone. Water thought, may I be many, may I grow forth. It sent forth earth, food. Therefore, whenever it rains anywhere, most food is then produced. From water alone is eatable food produced. Third Kanda. Of all living things, there are indeed three origins only: that which springs from an egg, oviparous; that which springs from a living being, viviparous; and that which springs from a germ. That being, that is, that which had produced fire, water, and earth, thought, let me now center those three beings, fire, water, earth, with this living self, Jiva, Atma, and let me then develop names and forms. Then that being having said, let me make each of these three tripartite, so that fire, water, and earth should each have itself for its principal ingredient, besides an admixture of the other two, entered into those three beings, Devata, with this living self only, and revealed names and forms. He made each of these tripartite. And how these three beings became each of them tripartite, that learn from me now, my friend. Fourth Kanda. The red color of burning fire, Agni, is the color of fire. The white color of fire is the color of water. The black color of fire, the color of earth. Thus vanishes what we call fire as a mere variety, being a name arising from speech. What is true, Satya, are the three colors or forms. The red color of the sun, Aditya, is the color of fire. The white of water, the black of earth. Thus vanishes what we call the sun as a mere variety, being a name arising from speech. What is true are the three colors. The red color of the moon is the color of fire, the white of water, and black of earth. Thus vanishes what we call the moon as a mere variety, being a name arising from speech. What is true are the three colors. The red color of the lightning is the color of fire, the white of water, the black of earth. Thus vanishes what we call the lightning as a mere variety, being a name arising from speech. What is true are the three colors. Great householders and great theologians of olden times, who knew this, have declared the same, saying, no one can henceforth mention to us anything which we have not heard, perceived, or known. Out of these three colors or forms they knew all. Whatever they thought looked red, they knew was the color of fire. Whatever they thought looked white, they knew was the color of water. Whatever they thought looked black, they knew was the color of earth. Whatever they thought was altogether unknown, they knew was some combination of those three beings, Devata. Now learn from me, my friend, how those three beings, when they reach man, become each of them tripartite. Fifth Kanda. The earth food, when eaten, becomes threefold. Its grossest portion becomes feces. its middle portion flesh, its subtlest portion mind. Water, when drunk, becomes threefold. Its grossest portion becomes water, its middle portion blood, its subtlest portion breath. Fire, that is in oil, butter, etc., when eaten becomes threefold. Its grossest portion becomes bone, its middle portion marrow, its subtlest portion speech. For truly, my child, mind comes of earth, breath of water, speech of fire. "Please, sir, inform me still more," said the son. "Be it so, my child," the father replied. Sixth Kanda. That which is the subtle portion of curds, when churned, rises upwards and becomes butter. In the same manner, my child, the subtle portion of earth, food, when eaten, rises upwards and becomes mind. That which is the middle portion of water, when drunk, rises upwards and becomes breath. That which is the subtle portion of fire, when consumed, rises upwards and becomes speech. For mind, my child, comes of earth, breath of water, speech of fire. "Please, sir, inform me still more," said the son. "Be it so, my child," the father replied. Seventh Kanda. Man, Purusha, my son, consists of 16 parts. Abstain from food for 15 days, but drink as much water as you like, for breath comes from water, and will not be cut off if you drink water. Swetaketu abstained from food for 15 days. Then he came back to his father and said, "What shall I say?" The father said, "Repeat the Rik, Yajus, and Saman verses." He replied, "They do not occur to me, sir." The father said to him, "As of a great lighted fire, one cord only of he size of a firefly may be left, which would not burn much more than this, that is, very little. Thus, my dear son, one part only of the 16 parts of you is left, and therefore with that one part you do not remember the Vedas. Go and eat, then wilt thou understand me." Then Swetaketu ate, and afterwards approached his father, and whatever his father asked him, he knew it all by heart. Then his father said to him, "As of a great lighted fire, one coal of the size of a firefly, if left, may be made to blaze up again by putting grass upon it, and will thus burn more than this. Thus, my dear son, there was one part of the 16 parts left to you, and that lighted up with food, burnt up, and by it you remember now the Vedas." And after that he understood what his father meant when he said, "Mind, my son, comes from food, breath from water, speech from fire." He understood what he said. Yeah, he understood it. Eighth Kanda. Uddalaka Aruni said to his son Swetaketu, "Learn from me the true nature of sleep, Swapna. When a man sleeps here, then, my dear son, he becomes united with the True. He is gone to his own self. Therefore they say, Swapiti, he sleeps, because he is gone, Apita, to his own Swa. As a bird, when tied by a string, flies first in every direction, and finding no rest anywhere, settles down at last on the very place where it is fastened, exactly in the same manner, my son, that mind, the Jiva, or living self in the mind, after flying in every direction, and finding no rest anywhere, settles down on breath. For indeed, my son, mind is fastened to breath. Learn from me, my son, what are hunger and thirst, When a man is thus said to be hungry, water is carrying away, digests what has been eaten by him. Therefore, as they speak of a cow leader, Gonaya, a horse leader, Asvanaya, a man leader, Purushanaya, so they call water which digests food and causes hunger, food leader, Asanaya. Thus, by food digested, etc., my son, know this offshoot, the body, to be brought forth, for this body could not be without a root cause. And where could its root be except in food, earth? And in the same manner, my son, as food, earth too is an offshoot, seek after its root, namely water. And as water too is an offshoot, seek after its root, namely fire. And as fire too is an offshoot, seek after its root, namely the True. Yes, all these creatures, my son, have their root in the True. They dwell in the True, they rest in the True. When a man is thus said to be thirsty, fire carries away what has been drunk by him. Therefore, as they speak of a cow leader, Gonaya, of a horse leader, Asvanaya, of a man leader, Purushanaya, so they call fire Udnaya, thirst, that is, water leader. Thus, by water digested, etc., my son, know this offshoot, the body, to be brought forth. This body could not be without a root cause. And where could its root be except in water? As water is an offshoot, seek after its root, namely fire. As fire is an offshoot, seek after its root, namely the True. Yes, all these creatures, O son, have their root in the True. They dwell in the True, they rest in the True. And how these three beings, Devata, fire, water, earth, O son, when they reach man, become each of them tripartite, has been said before. When a man departs from hence, his speech is merged in his mind in his breath in heat, fire. Heat is the highest being. Now that which is that subtle essence, the root of all, in it all that exists has its self. It is the True, it is the Self, and thou, O Svetaketu, art it. Please, sir, inform me still more, said the son. Be it so, my child, the father replied. Ninth Kanda. As the bees, my son, make honey by collecting the juices of distant trees, and reduce the juice into one form, and as these juices have no discrimination, so that they might say, I am the juice of this tree or that, in the same manner, my son, all these creatures, when they have become merged in the True, either in deep sleep or in death, know not that they are merged in the True. Whatever these creatures are here, whether a lion, or a wolf, or a boar, or a worm, or a midge, or a gnat, or a mosquito, that they become again and again. Now that which is the subtle essence, in it all that exists has its self. It is the True, it is the Self. And thou, O Svetaketu, art it. Please, sir, inform me still more, said the son. Be it so, my child, the father replied. 10th Kanda. These rivers, my son, run, the eastern like the Ganga toward the east, the western like the Sindhu toward the west. They go from sea to sea, that is, the clouds lift up the water from the sea to the sky, and send it back as rain to the sea. They become indeed sea. And as those rivers, when they are in the sea, do not know I am this or that river, in the same manner, my son, all these creatures, when they have come back from the True, know not that they have come back from the True. Whatever these creatures are here, whether a lion or a wolf or a boar or a worm or a midge or a gnat or a mosquito, that they become again and again. That which is that subtle essence, in it all that exists has its self. It is the true, it is the self, and thou, O Swetaketu, art it. Please, sir, inform me still more, said the son. Be it so, my child, the father replied. 11th Kanda. If someone were to strike at the root of this large tree here, it would bleed, but live. If he were to strike at its stem, it would bleed, but live. If he were to strike at its top, it would bleed, but live. Pervaded by the living self, that tree stands firm, drinking in its nourishment and rejoicing. But if the life, the living self, leaves one of its branches, that branch withers. If it leaves a second, that branch withers. If it leaves a third, that branch withers. If it leaves the whole tree withers. In exactly the same manner, my son, know this. Thus he spoke. This body, indeed, it is the true, it is the self, and thou, Swetaketu, art it. Please, sir, inform me still more, said the son. Be it so, my child, the father replied. 12th Kanda. Fetch me from thence a fruit of the Nyagrodha tree. Here is one, sir. Break it. It is broken, sir. What do you see there? The seeds, almost infinitesimal. Break one of them. It is broken, sir. What do you see there? Not anything, sir. The father said, My son, that subtle essence which you do not perceive there, of that very essence this great Nyagrodha tree exists. Believe it, my son, that which is the subtle essence, in it all that exists has itself. It is the true, it is the self, and thou, O Swetaketu, art it. Please, sir, inform me still more, said the son. Be it so, my child, the father replied. 13th Kanda. Place this salt in water, and then wait on me in the morning. The son did as he was commanded. The father said to him, Bring me the salt which you placed in the water last night. The son, having looked for it, found it not, for, of course, it was melted. The father said, Taste it from the surface of the water. How is it? The son replied, It is salt. Taste it from the middle. How is it? The son replied, It is salt. Taste it from the bottom. How is it? The son replied, It is salt. The father said, Throw it away, and then wait on me. He did so, but salt exists forever. Then the father said, Here also in this body, forsooth you do not perceive the true Sat, my son, but there indeed it is, that which is the subtle essence. In it all that exists has its self. It is the true, it is the self, and thou, O Swetaketu, art it. Please, sir, inform me still more, said the son. Be it so, my child, the father replied. 14th Kanda. As one might lead a person with his eyes covered away from the Gandharas, and leave him then in a place where there are no human beings, and as that person would turn towards the east, or the north, or the west, and shout, I have been brought here with my eyes covered. I have been left here with my eyes covered. And as thereupon someone might loose his bandage and say to him, Go in that direction, it is Gandhara, go in that direction. And as thereupon, having been informed and being able to judge for himself, he would, by asking his way from village to village, arrive at last at Gandhara. In exactly the same manner does a man who meets with a teacher to inform him obtain the true knowledge. For him there is only delay so long as he is not delivered from the body, then he will be perfect. That which is the subtle essence, in it all that exists has itself. It is the true, it is the self, and thou, O Swetaketu, art it. Please, sir, inform me still more, said the son. Be it so, my child, the father replied. 15th Kanda. If a man is ill, his relatives assemble round him and ask, Dost thou know me? Dost thou know me? Now, as long as his speech is not merged in his mind in breath, breath in heat, fire, heat in the highest being, Devata, he knows them. But when his speech is merged in his mind in breath, breath in heat, fire, heat in the highest being, then he knows them not. That which is the subtle essence, in it all that exists has its self. It is the true, it is the self, and thou, O Swetaketu, art it. Please, sir, inform me still more, said the son. Be it so, my child, the father replied. 16th Kanda. My child, they bring a man hither whom they have taken by the hand, and they say, he has taken something, he has committed a theft. When he denies, they say, heat the hatchet for him. If he committed the theft, then he makes himself to be what he is not. Then the false-minded, having covered his true self by a falsehood, grasps the heated hatchet, he is burnt and he is killed. But if he did not commit the theft, then he makes himself to be what he is. Then the true-minded, having covered his true self by truth, grasps the heated hatchet, he is not burnt, and he is delivered. As that truthful man is not burnt, thus has all that exists itself in that. It is the true, it is the self, and thou, O Swetaketu, art it. He understood what he said. Yeah, he understood it. End of Prapataka 6. Recording by Jyoti Taravanat. Prapataka 7 of the Chandogya Upanishad. Translated by Max Muller. This LibriVox recording is on the public domain. Recording by Jyoti Taravanat. 7th Prapataka, 1st Kanda. Narada approached Sanat Kumara and said, Teach me, sir. Sanat Kumara said to him, Please to tell me what you know. Afterward, I shall tell you what is beyond. Narada said, I know the Rig Veda, sir, the Yajur Veda, the Sama Veda, as the fourth, the Atharvana, as the fifth, the Itihasa Purana, the Bharata, the Veda of the Vedas, grammar, the Pitra, the rules for the sacrifices for the ancestors, the Rasi, the science of numbers, the Daiva, the science of portents; the Nidhi, the science of time; the Vakovakya, logic; the Ekayana, ethics; the Deva Vidya, etymology; the Brahma Vidya, pronunciation; Siksha, ceremonial; Kalpa, prosody, Khandas; the Bhuta Vidya, the science of demons; the Shastra Vidya, the science of weapons; the Nakshatra Vidya, astronomy; the Sarpa, the Devajnana Vidya, the science of serpents or poisons; and the sciences of the genii, such as making of perfumes, dancing, singing, playing, and other fine arts. All this I know, Sir. But, Sir, with all this, I know the mantras only, the sacred books. I do not know the Self. I have heard from men like you that he who knows the Self overcomes grief. I am in grief. Do, Sir, help me over this grief of mine. Sanat Kumara said to him, Whatever you have read is only a name. A name is the Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Sama Veda, and as the fourth the Atharvana, as the fifth the Itihasa Purana, the Veda of Vedas, the Pitriya, the Rasi, the Daiva, the Nidhi, the Vakovakya, the Ekayana, the Deva Vidya, the Brahma Vidya, the Bhuta Vidya, the Shastra Vidya, the Nakshatra Vidya, the Sarpa, and Devajnana Vidya. All these are a name only. Meditate on the name. He who meditates on the name as Brahman is, as it were, Lord and Master, as far as the name reaches. He who meditates on the name as Brahman. Sir, is there something better than a name? Yes, there is something better than a name. Sir, tell it me. Second Kanda. Speech is better than a name. Speech makes us understand the Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Sama Veda, and as the fourth the Atharvana, as the fifth the Itihasa Purana, the Veda of Vedas, the Pitra, the Rasi, the Daiva, the Nidhi, the Vakovakya, the Ekayana, the Deva Vidya, the Brahma Vidya, the Shastra Vidya, the Nakshatra Vidya, the Sarpa, and Devajnana Vidya, heaven, earth, air, ether, water, fire, gods, men, cattle, birds, herbs, trees, all beasts down to worms, midget, and ants. What is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is false, what is good and what is bad, what is pleasing and what is not pleasing. For if there were no speech, neither right nor wrong would be known, neither the true nor the false, neither the good nor the bad, neither the pleasant nor the unpleasant. Speech makes us understand all this. Meditate on speech. He who meditates on speech as Brahman is, as it were, Lord and Master as far as speech reaches. He who meditates on speech as Brahman. Sir, is there something better than speech? Yes, there is something better than speech. Sir, tell it me. Third Kanda. Mind, Manas, is better than speech. For as the closed fist holds two Amalaka or two Kola or two Aksha fruits, thus does mind hold speech and name. For if a man is minded in his mind to read the sacred hymns, he reads them. If he is minded in his mind to perform any actions, he performs them. If he is minded to wish for sons and cattle, he wishes for them. If he is minded to wish for this world and the other, he wishes for them. For mind is indeed the self, mind is the world, mind is Brahman. Meditate on the mind. He who meditates on the mind as Brahman is, as it were, Lord and Master as far as the mind reaches. He who meditates on the mind as Brahman. Sir, is there something better than mind? Yes, there is something better than mind. Sir, tell it me. Fourth Kanda. Will, Sankalpa, is better than mind. For when a man wills, then he thinks in his mind, then he sends forth speech, and he sends it forth in a name. In a name the sacred hymns are contained. In the sacred hymns all sacrifices. All these, therefore, beginning with mind and ending in sacrifice, center in will, consist of will, abide in will. Heaven and earth willed, air and ether willed, water and fire willed. Through the will of heaven and earth, etc., rain wills. Through the will of rain, food wills. Through the will of food, the vital airs will. Through the will of the vital airs, the sacred hymns will. Through the will of the sacred hymns, the sacrifices will. Through the will of the sacrifices, the world as their reward wills. Through the will of the world, everything wills. This is will. Meditate on will. He who meditates on will as Brahman, he, being himself safe, firm, and undistressed, obtains the safe, firm, and undistressed worlds which he has willed. He is, as it were, Lord and Master, as far as will reaches. He who meditates on will as Brahman. Sir, is there something better than will? Yes, there is something better than will. Sir, tell it me. Fifth Kanda. Consideration, Chitta, is better than will. For when a man considers, then he wills. Then he thinks in his mind, then he sends forth speech, and he sends it forth in a name. In a name the sacred hymns are contained. In the sacred hymns all sacrifices. All these, beginning with mind and ending in sacrifice, center in consideration, consist of consideration, abide in consideration. Therefore, if a man is inconsiderate, even if he possesses much learning, people say of him, he is nothing, whatever he may know, for if he were learned, he would not be so inconsiderate. But if a man is considerate, even though he knows but little, to him indeed do people listen gladly. Consideration is the center. Consideration is the self. Consideration is the support of all these. Meditate on consideration. He who meditates on consideration as Brahman, he, being himself safe, firm, and undistressed, obtains the safe, firm, and undistressed worlds which he has considered. He is, as it were, Lord and Master as far as consideration reaches. He who meditates on consideration as Brahman. Sir, Is there something better than consideration? Yes, there is something better than consideration. Sir, tell it me. Sixth Kanda. Reflection, dhyana, is better than consideration. The earth reflects, as it were, and thus does the sky, the heaven, the water, the mountains, gods, and men. Therefore, those who among men obtain greatness here on earth seem to have obtained a part of the object of reflection, because they show a certain repose of manner. Thus, while small and vulgar people are always quarrelling, abusive, and slandering, great men seem to have obtained a part of the reward of reflection. Meditate on reflection. He who meditates on reflection as Brahman is Lord and Master, as it were, as far as reflection reaches. He who meditates on reflection as Brahman. Sir, is there something better than reflection? Yes, there is something better than reflection. Sir, tell it me. Seventh Kanda. Understanding, Vijnana, is better than reflection. Through understanding, we understand the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Sama Veda, and as the fourth, the Atharvana, as the fifth, the Itihasa Purana, the Veda of Vedas, the Pitra, the Rasi, the Daiva, the Nidhi, the Vakovakya, the Ekayana, the Deva Vidya, the Brahma Vidya, the Bhuta Vidya, the Kshatriya Vidya, the Nakshatra Vidya, the Sarpa, the Devajnana Vidya, heaven, earth, air, ether, water, fire, gods, men, cattle, birds, herbs, trees, all beasts down to worms, midges, and ants, what is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is false, what is good and what is bad, what is pleasing and what is not pleasing, food and savour, this world and that, all this we understand through understanding. Meditate on understanding. He who meditates on understanding as Brahman reaches the worlds where there is understanding and knowledge. He is, as it were, Lord and Master as far as understanding reaches. He who meditates on understanding as Brahman. Sir, is there something better than understanding? Yes, there is something better than understanding. Sir, tell it me. Eighth Kanda. Power, Bhala, is better than understanding. One powerful man shakes 100 men of understanding. If a man is powerful, he becomes a rising man. If he rises, he becomes a man who visits wise people. If he visits, he becomes a follower of wise people. If he follows them, he becomes a seeing, a hearing, a perceiving, a knowing, a doing, an understanding man. By power the earth stands firm, and the sky, and the heaven, and the mountains, gods, and men, cattle, birds, herbs, trees, all beasts down to worms, midges, and ants. By power the world stands firm. Meditate on power. He who meditates on power as Brahman is, as it were, Lord and Master as far as power reaches. He who meditates on power as Brahman. Sir, is there something better than power? Yes, there is something better than power. Sir, tell it me. Ninth Kanda. Food, Anna, is better than power. Therefore, if a man abstain from food for 10 days, though he live, he would be unable to see, hear, perceive, think, act, and understand. But when he obtains food, he is able to see, hear, perceive, think, act, and understand. Meditate on food. He who meditates on food as Brahman obtains the worlds rich in food and drink. He is, as it were, Lord and Master as far as food reaches. He who meditates on food as Brahman. Sir, is there something better than food? Yes, there is something better than food. Sir, tell it me. 10th Kanda. Water up is better than food. Therefore, if there is not sufficient rain, the vital spirits fail from fear that there will be less food. But if there is sufficient rain, the vital spirits rejoice because there will be much food. This water, on assuming different forms, becomes this earth, this sky, this heaven, the mountains, gods and men, cattle, birds, herbs and trees, all beasts down to worms, midges and ants. Water indeed assumes all these forms. Meditate on water. He who meditates on water as Brahman obtains all wishes. He becomes satisfied. He is, as it were, Lord and Master as far as water reaches. He who meditates on water as Brahman. Sir, is there something better than water? Yes, there is something better than water. Sir, tell it me. 11th Kanda. Fire, Tejas, is better than water. For fire, united with air, warms the ether. Then people say, it is hot, it burns, it will rain. Thus does fire, after showing the sign itself first, create water. And thus again thunderclaps come with lightnings, flashing upwards and across the sky. Then people say, there is lightning and thunder, it will rain. Then also does fire, after showing this sign first, create water. Meditate on fire. He who meditates on fire as Brahman obtains resplendent himself, resplendent worlds, full of light and free of darkness. He is, as it were, Lord and Master as far as fire reaches. He who meditates on fire as Brahman. Sir, is there something better than fire? Yes, there is something better than fire. Sir, tell it me. 12th Kanda. Ether, or space, is better than fire. For in ether exist both sun and moon, the lightning, stars, and fire, Agni. Through the ether we call, through the ether we hear, through the ether we answer. In the ether or space we rejoice when we are together, and rejoice not when we are separated. In the ether everything is born, and towards the ether everything tends when it is born. Meditate on ether. He who meditates on ether as Brahman obtains the worlds of ether and of light, which are free from pleasure and pain, wide and spacious. He is, as it were, Lord and Master as far as ether reaches. He who meditates on ether as Brahman. Sir, Is there something better than ether? Yes, there is something better than ether. Sir, tell it me. 13th Kanda. Memory, Smara, is better than ether. Therefore, where many are assembled together, if they have no memory, they would hear no one, they would not perceive, they would not understand. Through memory, we know our sons. Through memory, our cattle. Meditate on memory. He who meditates on memory as Brahman is, as it were, Lord and Master as far as memory reaches. He who meditates on memory as Brahman. Sir, is there something better than memory? Yes, there is something better than memory. Sir, tell it me. 14th Kanda. Hope, Asha, is better than memory. Fired by hope, does memory read the sacred hymns, perform sacrifices, desire sons and cattle, desire this world and the other. Meditate on hope. He who meditates on hope as Brahman, all his desires are fulfilled by hope. His prayers are not in vain. He is, as it were, Lord and Master as far as hope reaches. He who meditates on hope as Brahman. Sir, is there something better than hope? Yes, there is something better than hope. Sir, tell it me. 15th Kanda. Spirit, Prana, is better than hope. As the spokes of a wheel hold to the nave, so does all this, beginning with names and ending in hope, hold to spirit. That spirit moves by the spirit. It gives spirit to the spirit. Father means spirit. Mother is spirit. Brother is spirit. Sister is spirit. Tutor is spirit. Brahmana is spirit. For if one says anything unbecoming to a father, mother, brother, sister, tutor, or Brahmana, then people say, "Shame on thee! Thou hast offended thy father, mother, brother, sister, tutor, or a Brahmana." But if after the spirit has departed from them, one shoves them together with a poker and burns them to pieces, no one would say, "Thou offendest thy father, mother, brother, sister, tutor, or a Brahmana." Spirit, then, is all this. He who sees this, perceives this, and understands this, becomes an Ativadin. If people say to such a man, "Thou art an Ativadin," he may say, "I am an Ativadin." He need not deny it. 16th Kanda. But in reality, he is an Ativadin who declares the highest being to be the true, Satya. Sir, may I become an Ativadin by the true? But we must desire to know the true. Sir, I desire to know the true. 17th Kanda. When one understands the true, then one declares the true. One who does not understand it does not declare the true. Only he who understands it declares the true. This understanding, however, we must desire to understand. Sir, I desire to understand it. 18th Kanda. When one perceives, then one understands. One who does not perceive does not understand. Only he who perceives understands. This perception, however, we must desire to understand. Sir, I desire to understand it. 19th Kanda. When one believes, then one perceives. One who does not believe does not perceive. Only he who believes perceives. This belief, however, we must desire to understand. Sir, I desire to understand it. 20th Kanda. When one attends on a tutor, spiritual guide, then one believes. One who does not attend on a tutor does not believe. Only he who attends believes. This attention on a tutor, however, we must desire to understand. Sir, I desire to understand it. 21st Kanda. When one performs all sacred duties, then one attends really on a tutor. One who does not perform his duties does not really attend on a tutor. Only he who performs his duties attends on his tutor. This performance of duties, however, we must desire to understand. Sir, I desire to understand it. 22nd Kanda. When one obtains bliss in oneself, then one performs duties. One who does not obtain bliss does not perform duties. Only he who obtains bliss performs duties. This bliss, however, we must desire to understand. Sir, I desire to understand it. 23rd Kanda. The infinite, Bhuman, is bliss. There is no bliss in anything finite. Infinity only is bliss. This infinity, however, we must desire to understand. Sir, I desire to understand it. 24th Kanda. Where one sees nothing else, hears nothing else, understands nothing else, that is the infinite. Where one sees something else, hears something else, understands something else, that is the finite. The infinite is immortal, the finite is mortal. Sir, in what does the infinite rest? In its own greatness, or not even in greatness? In the world they call cows and horses, elephants and gold, slaves, wives, fields, and houses greatness. I do not mean this. Thus he spoke. For in that case, one being the possessor rests in something else. But the infinite cannot rest in something different from itself. 25th Kanda. The infinite indeed is below, above, behind, before, right and left. It is indeed all this. Now follows the explanation of the infinite as the I. I am below, I am above, I am behind, before, right and left. I am all this. Next follows the explanation of the infinite as the Self. Self is below, above, behind, before, right and left. Self is all this. He who sees, perceives, and understands this loves the Self, delights in the Self, revels in the Self, rejoices in the Self. He becomes a Swarag, an autocrat or self-ruler. He is lord and master in all the worlds. But those who think differently from this live in perishable worlds and have other beings for their rulers. 26th Kanda. To him who sees, perceives and understands this, the spirit prana springs from the self, hope springs from the self, memory springs from the self. So do ether, fire, water, appearance and disappearance, food, power, understanding, reflection, consideration, will, mind, speech, names, sacred hymns and sacrifices. Aye, all this springs from the self. There is this verse: he who sees this does not see death, nor illness, nor pain. He who sees this sees everything, and obtains everything everywhere. He is one before creation. He becomes three: fire, water, earth. He becomes five. He becomes seven. He becomes nine. Then again he is called the 11th, and 110, and 1020. When the intellectual ailment has been purified, the whole nature becomes purified. When the whole nature has been purified, the memory becomes firm. And when the memory of the highest self remains firm, then all the ties which bind us to a belief in anything but the self are loosened. The Venerable Sanat Kumara showed to Narada, after his faults had been rubbed out, the other side of darkness. They call Sananta Kumara Skanda. Yeah, Skanda they call him. End of Prapataka 7. Recording by Jyoti Taravanat. Prapataka 8 of the Chandogya Upanishad, translated by Max Muller. Recording by Jyoti Taravanat. 8th Prapataka, 1st Kanda. Hari Om. There is the city of Brahman, the body, and in it the palace, the small lotus of the heart, and in it that small ether. Now what exists within that small ether, that is to be sought for, that is to be understood. And if they should say to him, now with regard to that city of Brahman, and the palace in it, that is, the small lotus of the heart, and the small ether within the heart, what is there within it that deserves to be sought for, or that is to be understood? Then he should say, as large as this ether all space is, so large is that ether within the heart. Both heaven and earth are contained within it, both fire and air, both sun and moon, both lightning and stars, and whatever there is of him, the self, here in the world, and whatever is not, that is, whatever has been or will be, all that is contained within it. And if they should say to him, if everything that exists is contained in that city of Brahman, all beings and all desires, whatever can be imagined or desired, then
what is left of it when old age reaches it and scatters it, or when it falls to pieces? Then he should say, by the old age of the body, that the ether or Brahman within it does not age; by the death of the body, that the ether or Brahman within it is not killed; that the Brahman is the true Brahma city, not the body. In it all desires are contained. It is the Self, free from sin, free from old age, from death and grief, from hunger and thirst, which desires nothing but what it ought to desire, and imagines nothing but what it ought to imagine. Now, as here on earth people follow as they are commanded, and depend on the object which they are attached to, be it a country or a piece of land, and as here on earth whatever has been acquired by exertion perishes, so perishes whatever is acquired for the next world by sacrifices and other good actions performed on earth. Those who depart from hence without having discovered the Self and those true desires, for them there is no freedom in all the worlds. But those who depart from hence after having discovered the Self and those true desires, for them there is freedom in all the worlds. Second Kanda. Thus, he who desires the world of the fathers, by his mere will the fathers come to receive him, and having obtained the world of the fathers, he is happy. And he who desires the world of the mothers, by his mere will the mothers come to receive him, and having obtained the world of the mothers, he is happy. And he who desires the world of the brothers, by his mere will the brothers come to receive him, and having obtained the world of the brothers, he is happy. And he who desires the world of the sisters, by his mere will the sisters come to receive him, and having obtained the world of the sisters, he is happy. And he who desires the world of the friends, by his mere will the friends come to receive him, and having obtained the world of the friends, he is happy. And he who desires the world of perfumes and garlands, Gandhamalaya, by his mere will perfumes and garlands come to him, and having obtained the world of the perfumes and garlands, he is happy. And he who desires the world of food and drink, by his mere will food and drink come to him, and having obtained the world of food and drink, he is happy. And he who desires the world of song and music, by his mere will song and music will come to him, and having obtained the world of song and music, he is happy. And he who desires the world of women, by his mere will women come to receive him, and having obtained the world of women, he is happy. Whatever object he is attached to, whatever object he desires, by his mere will it comes to him, and having obtained it, he is happy. Third Kanda. These true desires, however, are hidden by what is false. Though the desires be true, they have a covering which is false. Thus, whosoever belonging to us has departed this life, him we cannot gain back, so that we should see him with our eyes. Those who belong to us, whether living, are departed, and whatever else there is which we wish for and do not obtain, all that we find there, if we descend into our heart, where Brahman dwells, in the ether of the heart. There are all our true desires, but hidden by what is false. As people who do not know the country walk again and again over a gold treasure that has been hidden somewhere in the earth, but do not discover it, thus do all these creatures, day after day, go into the Brahma world. They are merged in Brahman while asleep, and yet do not discover it, because they are carried away by untruth. They do not come to themselves, that is, they do not discover the true self in Brahman dwelling in the heart. That self abides in the heart, and this is the etymological explanation. The heart is called Hridayam instead of Hridayayam, that is, he who is in the heart. He who knows this, that he is in the heart, goes day by day, when in Sushupti, deep sleep, into heaven, Swarga, that is, into the Brahman of the heart. Now, that serene being, which, after having risen from out of this earthly body, and having reached the highest light, self-knowledge, appears in its true form, that is the Self. Thus he spoke when asked by his pupils. This is the Immortal, the Fearless, this is Brahman, and of that Brahman the name is the True, Satyam. This name Satyam consists of 3 syllables, Sat, Ti, Yam. Sat signifies the Immortal, Ti the Immortal, and with Yam he binds both. Because he binds both, the Immortal and the Mortal, therefore it is Yam. He who knows this goes day by day into heaven, Swarga. Fourth Kanda. That Self is a bank, a boundary, so that these worlds may not be confounded. Day and night do not pass that bank, nor old age, death, and grief, neither good nor evil deeds. All evildoers turn back from it, for the world of Brahman is free from all evil. Therefore, he who has crossed that bank, if blind, ceases to be blind; if wounded, ceases to be wounded; if afflicted, ceases to be afflicted. Therefore, when that bank has been crossed, night becomes day indeed, for the world of Brahman is lighted up once for all. And that world of Brahman belongs to those only who find it by abstinence. For them there is freedom in all the worlds. Fifth Kanda. What people call sacrifice, yajna, that is really abstinence, brahmacharya. For he who knows obtains that world of Brahman which others obtain by sacrifice, by means of abstinence. What people call sacrifice, Ishta, that is really abstinence. For by abstinence, having reached Ishtva, he obtains the Self. What people call sacrifice, Satrayana, that is really abstinence. For by abstinence, he obtains from the Sat, the True, the safety, Trana, of the Self. What people call the vow of silence, Mauna, that is really abstinence. For he who by abstinence has found out the Self, meditates, Maunate. What people call fasting, Anaskayana, that is really abstinence. For that Self does not perish, Nanasyati, which we find out by abstinence. What people call a hermit's life, Aranyayana, that is really abstinence. Ara and Nya are two lakes in the world of Brahman, in the third heaven from hence. And there is the lake Airamadiya and the Aswatha tree, showering down Soma, and the city of Brahman, Hiranyagarbha, Aparajita, and the golden Prabhu Vimita, the hall built by Prabhu Brahman. Now that world of Brahman belongs to those who find the lakes of Ara and Nya in the world of Brahman by means of abstinence. For them there is freedom in all the worlds. Sixth Kanda. Now those arteries of the heart consist of a brown substance, of a white, blue, and red substance. And so is the sun, brown, white, blue, yellow, and red. As a very long highway goes to two places, to one at the beginning and to another at the end, so do the rays of the sun go to both worlds, to this one and to the other. They start from the sun and enter into those arteries. They start from those arteries and enter into the sun. And when a man is asleep, reposing, and at perfect rest, so that he sees no dream, then he has entered into those arteries. Then no evil touches him, for he has obtained the light of the sun. And when a man falls ill, then those who sit round him say, "Do you know me? Do you know me?" As long as he has not departed from this body, he knows them. But when he departs from this body, then he departs upwards by those very rays towards the worlds which he has gained by merit, not by knowledge. Or he goes out while meditating on Om, and thus securing an entrance into the Brahmaloka. And while his mind is failing, he is going to the sun. For the sun is the door of the world of Brahman. Those who know walk in, those who do not know are shut out. There is this verse: there are 101 arteries of the heart. One of them penetrates the crown of the head. Moving upwards by it, a man reaches the Immortal. The others serve for departing in different directions. In different directions. Seventh Kanda. Prajapati said, the Self which is free from sin, free from old age, free from death and grief, from hunger and thirst, which desires nothing but what it ought to desire, and imagines nothing but what it ought to imagine, that it is which we must search out, that it is which we must try to understand. He who has searched out that Self and understands it obtains all the worlds and all desires. The Devas, gods, and Asuras, demons, both heard these words and said, "Well, let us search for that Self by which, if one has searched it out, all worlds and all desires are obtained." Thus saying, Indira went from the Devas, Virochana from the Asuras, and both, without having communicated with each other, approached Prajapati, holding fuel in their hands, as is the custom for pupils approaching their master. They dwelt there as pupils for 32 years. Then Prajapati asked them, "For what purpose have you both dwelt here?" They replied, "A saying of yours is being repeated, namely, the Self which is free from sin, free from old age, from death and grief, from hunger and thirst, which desires nothing but what it ought to desire, and imagines nothing but what it ought to imagine, that it is which we must search out, that it is which we must try to understand. He who has searched out that Self and understands it obtains all worlds and all desires." Now we both have dwelt here because we wish for that Self. Prajapati said to them, "The person that is seen in the eye, that is the Self. That is what I have said. This is the Immortal, the Fearless. This is Brahman." They asked, "Sir, he who is perceived in the water, and he who is perceived in a mirror, who is he?" He replied, "He himself, indeed, is seen in all these." 8th Kanda. Look at yourself in a pan of water, and whatever you do not understand of yourself, come and tell me. They looked in the water pan. Then Prajapati said to them, "What do you see?" They said, "We both see the Self thus altogether, a picture, even to the very hairs and nails." Prajapati said to them, "After you have adorned yourself, have put on your best clothes and cleaned yourself, look again into the water pan." They, after having adorned themselves, having put on their best clothes and cleaned themselves, looked into the water pan. Prajapati said, "What do you see?" They said, "Just as we are, well adorned, with our best clothes and clean, thus we are both there, Sir, well adorned, with our best clothes and clean." Prajapati said, "That is the Self. This is the Immortal, the Fearless. This is Brahman." Then both went away, satisfied in their hearts. And Prajapati, looking after them, said, "They both go away without having perceived and without having known the Self, and whoever of these two, whether Devas or Asuras, will follow this doctrine, Upanishad, will perish." Now Virochana, satisfied in his art, went to the Asuras and preached that doctrine to them, that the Self, the body alone, is to be worshipped, that the Self, the body alone, is to be served, and that he who worships the Self and serves the Self, gains both worlds, this and the next. Therefore they call even now a man who does not give alms here, who has no faith and offers no sacrifices, an Asura. For this is the doctrine Upanishad of the Asuras. They deck out the body of the dead with perfumes, flowers, and fine raiment by way of ornament, and think they will thus conquer that world. Ninth Kanda. But Indra, before he had returned to the Devas, saw this difficulty. As this Self, the shadow in the water, is well adorned when the body is well adorned, well dressed when the body is well dressed, well cleaned if the body is well cleaned, that Self will also be blind if the body is blind, lame if the body is lame, crippled if the body is crippled, and will perish, in fact, as soon as the body perishes. Therefore I see no good in this doctrine. Taking fuel in his hand, he came again as a pupil to Prajapati. Prajapati said to him, Mahavat Indra, as you went away with Virochana satisfied in your heart, for what purpose did you come back? He said, Sir, as this Self, the shadow, is well adorned when the body is well adorned, well dressed when the body is well dressed, well cleaned if the body is well cleaned, that Self will also be blind if the body is blind, lame if the body is lame, crippled if the body is crippled, and will perish, in fact, as soon as the body perishes. Therefore I see no good in this doctrine. So it is indeed, Mahavat, replied Prajapati, but I shall explain him, the true Self, further to you. Live with me another 32 years. He lived with him another 32 years. And then Prajapati said, 10th Kanda. He who moves about happy in dreams, he is the Self. This is the Immortal, the Fearless. This is Brahman. Then Indra went away satisfied in his heart. But before he had returned to the Devas, he saw this difficulty. Although it is true that Self is not blind, even if the body is blind, nor lame if the body is lame, though it is true that Self is not rendered faulty by the faults of it, the body, nor struck when the body is struck, nor lamed when it is lamed, yet it is as if they struck him, the Self, in dreams, as if they chased him. He becomes even conscious, as it were, of pain and sheds tears. Therefore I see no good in this. Taking fuel in his hands, he went again as a pupil to Prajapati. Prajapati said to him, Mahavat, as you went away satisfied in your heart, for what purpose did you come back? He said, Sir, although it is true that Self is not blind even if the body is blind, nor lame if the body is lame, though it is true that Self is not rendered faulty by the faults of it, the body, nor struck when the body is struck, nor lamed when it is lamed, yet it is as if they struck him, the Self, in dreams, as if they chased him. He becomes even conscious, as it were, of pain, and sheds tears. Therefore I see no good in this. So it is indeed, Mahavat, replied Prajapati. But I shall explain him, the true Self, further to you. Live with me another 32 years. He lived with him another 32 years. Then Prajapati said, 11th Kanda. When a man being asleep, reposing, and at perfect rest, sees no dreams, that is the Self. This is the Immortal, the Fearless. This is Brahman. Then Indra went away satisfied in his heart. But before he had returned to the Devas, he saw this difficulty. In truth, he thus does not know himself, his self, that he is I, nor does he know anything that exists. He is gone to utter annihilation. I see no good in this. Taking fuel in his hand, he went again as a pupil to Prajapati. Prajapati said to him, Mahavat, as you went away satisfied in your heart, for what purpose did you come back? He said, Sir, in that way he does not know himself, his self, that he is I, nor does he know anything that exists. He is gone to utter annihilation. I see no good in this. So it is indeed, Mahavat, replied Prajapati. But I shall explain him, the true self, further to you, and nothing more than this. Live here other 5 years. He lived there other 5 years. This made in all 101 years, and therefore it is said that Indra Mahavat lived 101 years as a pupil with Prajapati. Prajapati said to him, 12th Kanda. Mahavat, this body is mortal and always held by death. It is the abode of that Self, which is immortal and without body. When in the body, by thinking this body is I, and I am this body, the Self is held by pleasure and pain. So long as he is in the body, he cannot get free from pleasure and pain. But when he is free of the body, when he knows himself different from the body, then neither pleasure nor pain touches him. The wind is without body. The cloud, lightning, and thunder are without body, without hands, feet, etc. Now, as these, arising from this heavenly ether, space, appear in their own form as soon as they have approached the highest light, thus does that serene being, arising from this body, appear in its own form as soon as it has approached the highest light, the knowledge of Self. He, in that state, is the highest person, Uttama Purusha. He moves about there, laughing or eating, playing and rejoicing in his mind, be it with women, carriages, or relatives, never minding that body into which he was born. Like as a horse attached to a cart, so is the spirit, prana, prajnatman, attached to this body. Now, where the sight has entered into the void, the open space, the black pupil of the eye, there is the person of the eye. The eye itself is the instrument of seeing. He who knows, let me smell this, he is the Self. The nose is the instrument of smelling. He who knows, let me say this, he is the Self. The tongue is the instrument of saying. He who knows, let me hear this, he is the Self. The ear is the instrument of hearing. He who knows, let me think this. He is the Self. The mind is his divine eye. He, the Self, seeing these pleasures, which to others are hidden like a buried treasure of gold, through his divine eye, that is, the mind, rejoices. The Devas who are in the world of Brahman meditate on that Self, as taught by Prajapati to Indra, and by Indra to the Devas. Therefore, all worlds belong to them, and all desires. He who knows that Self and understands it obtains all worlds and all desires. Thus said Prajapati. Thus said Prajapati. 13th Kanda. From the dark, the Brahman of the heart, I come to the nebulous, the world of Brahman. From the nebulous to the dark, shaking off all evil, as a horse shakes his hairs, and as the moon frees herself from the mouth of Rahu. Having shaken off the body, I obtain, self-made and satisfied, the uncreated world of Brahman. I obtain it. 14th Kanda. He who is called Ether, Akasa, is the reveller of all forms and names. That within which these forms and names are contained is the Brahman, the Immortal, the Self. I come to the hall of Prajapati, to the house. I am the glorious among Brahmins, glorious among princes, glorious among men. I obtained that glory. I am glorious among the glorious. May I never go to the white, toothless, yet devouring white abode. May I never go to it. 15th Kanda. Brahma, Hiranyagarbha or Parameshwara, told this to Prajapati, Kasyapa, Prajapati to Manu his son, Manu to mankind. He who has learnt the Veda from a family of teachers, according to the sacred rule, in the leisure time left from the duties to be performed for the Guru, who, after receiving his discharge, has settled in his own house, keeping up the memory of what he has learnt by repeating it regularly in some sacred spot, who has begotten virtuous sons, and concentrated all his senses on the Self, never giving pain to any creature, except at the tirthas, sacrifices, etc. He who behaves thus all his life reaches the world of Brahman and does not return. He does not return. End of Prapataka 8. Recording by Jyoti Taravanat. End of Chandogya Upanishad. Translated by Max Muller.